Mr. Greg Dickerson. How you doing, sir?
Doing fine, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I read an article over the weekend where I'm going to share the high-level highlights with you. And let's just say it's an opinion that I don't have. And it's probably the exact opposite of what I was thinking before I read the article. But the guy made some interesting arguments. And I thought we should talk about him today because sometimes you help me understand what I am missing. You ready for it?
Yep, let's do it.
So basically this economist, I'm actually trying to get him on the channel. So I reached out to him on LinkedIn, Jed Conwell or something to that nature. I probably mispronounced that. He's basically highlighting that the unemployment rate is about to drop to under 2%. His basic argument is we are coming out of a health crisis. We have bought enough stuff. We are about to expend on services. And the service sector doesn't have enough employees. So what we're about to see is huge wage inflation, like we haven't already, as they compete for more and more employees. And he is under the impression that it will be such a competitive force that wage inflation will be north of 5%. And ultimately the unemployment rate drops to under 2% this year. He then goes on to say that this will cause a wage inflation, which will cause the Fed to react because they're so far behind. There may be cause for them to move 1 full basis point next year, which could cause a deep, dark recession. But let's break it down this year. He's calling for unemployment to go under 2%. And I just can't wrap my brain around it, but I at least get his argument. What do you think?
Yeah, I understand what he's saying, but I mean, there's so much demand out there right now. I'm not sure that there's just a lot of demand, even in spite of inflation. So I'm not sure that's going to affect consumer spending at that level, like he's talking about. As far as employment goes, I mean, how do you even measure that? There's so many people that have exited the workforce that, are they unemployed? How are you measuring unemployment? So what does that mean? There's more jobs now than there are employees. So obviously that drives wage inflation. It's an employee market right now. You can kind of name your shot.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people talking about demand in the service sector dropping. But we haven't seen it yet. So I don't know how he's forecasting or what metrics he's looking at exactly, but right now we're nowhere near any of that.
Yeah.
There's too many jobs, not enough people. Wages are going up. How they can only go so far. You can only pay people so much, and people know that. And as inflation goes up, it affects people's savings and spending, and people will eventually that aren't working are eventually going to have to go back to work, because if we see the Fed actually do something, I don't know what it's going to take to get them moving, but if they actually do something and you start to see wealth destruction, then people that did retire from the workforce early because they had a nice portfolio, they're gonna have to go back to work because that portfolio is going to get cut in half if it didn't already.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot in this because again, I don't, obviously he's using U3, not U6, right? Because we're at 4% today, at least the last print that I saw. So to drop that in half, if it happened, wage inflation in 2021 was 5.2%. Wage inflation, because again, you always have some of that unemployment just in the churn, right? To cut that in half. My brain can't wrap around it. But again, it's an interesting argument. The service sector, again, around me is definitely behind as far as activities. There's been a lot of people buying stuff in cardboard boxes delivered home from Amazon or Etsy or whatever it is. I could get it, right? I know I'm antsy to get out and socialize and take trips, and so it was an interesting argument.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And the biggest wage inflation has been at the service level, restaurants, hotels, retail, those types of things, where those wages have been lagging behind. So a lot of that's baked in right now. So the question is, how much further does wage inflation go from here? Another 10, 20% from here. And companies, like we talked about in the last episode, they're already adjusting their pricing model. They're already adjusting their production levels. So it could get to a point to where companies will be like, well, we don't need more employees. We're just going to cut back on production because we're more profitable and there's more demand if we're producing less. So obviously that's at the manufacturing level and the big product level, whereas Amazon's not cutting back. They're hiring, they're bringing people on. Walmart, the big retailers are still going great guns. Restaurants are coming back. The travel industry is going to come back in a big way this year. more international probably than domestic. A lot of people are ready to get out of the country that haven't been able to the last 2 years. So, and the countries are opening up, not requiring a lot of loopholes to have to jump through.
Yep.
So, it's really difficult to forecast anything. And the biggest caveat is the Fed's been sitting on their hands for so long. I don't know what it's going to take to actually move them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is frightening to see how far behind it. Again, I had not gone there until I read the article, but I mean, it's possible that because what we saw in the 70s was wage inflation became anchored in the system, right? Wage inflation beget raising prices, which beget more wages. It was truly the wage spiral for 7 or 8 years in a row. And we could be walking into that, and if the Fed doesn't react or they stay so far behind, we may need a Paul Volcker moment. I think Paul Volcker, I think he raised rates like 26 times or something in a year, several times over a weekend. Yeah, Powell and team, wake up. You need to get in front of this, and they're acting like nothing's happened. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's only 1 or 2 that are outspoken about it and saying we need to take big action, and then the rest of them are like, we're fine, everything's good. So who knows? I mean, I think what it's going to take is going to take an uprising where people are out protesting and marching on, Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what gets politicians' attention to make things happen and get something done. Mm-hmm. And generally, as we saw with Greenspan, I mean, he tanked the economy in 2008 and 9 with interest rate policy and created, the financial crisis through real estate because of just easy to spot, simple moves that everybody was saying. Yeah. You can't raise interest rates when you have a real estate crisis on your hands and all this interest only debt restructuring and loans coming due.
Yeah.
I think we're going to repeat the same thing. Yeah. I think you're going to see almost the same thing kind of happening, and it's going to be a different, obviously, kind of situation. We're not in the same situation as we were back there, but some of the other countries around the world are with their real estate.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, look at Canada, for example. I have Canadian investors that follow the channel, as I'm sure you do. Their debt structure on housing is entirely different, right? It's 25-year AM, and I think their longest is 5 years fixed. That's a very different picture if interest rates are double what they are today. I'm not saying they will be. I'm just looking at the math. The math says that's painful. So that's why I've said it many times. I think the commercial sector is committing the same amount of sins and that residential was. Bad debt, short-term debt, bad assumptions. How many times do I hear people tell me that, commercial property only goes up, cap rates only go down? I'm like, God, where have I heard this before? You guys are going to get burned. It's going to be.
Yeah, painful. But you can't blame them, because I was the same way before 2008 and 9.
Yes.
Because it was true. I mean, real estate did nothing but go up. Markets did nothing but go up. Whatever you bought today was worth 10, 20% more tomorrow. I mean, I'm literally here. This was a strategy I used to use back in, pre 2008, 9. So probably 04, 05, when the market was peaking. If I had something on the market for 30 days and I didn't get any offers, I would raise the price and it would sell. I mean, that was a technique that we used to use. And we weren't getting multiple offers for a while on existing properties. I mean, it still took, average days on market were 4 to 6 months. A lot of people don't realize that or remember that in real estate in this country, forever and ever, the average days on market was 6 months. 4 to 6 months it would take to sell a property with normal inventory levels. And nowadays, with multiple offers and stuff, I mean, obviously there were always pockets and properties or whatever that you would get those things on. The only time we saw that kind of demand was for lots back when the building boom was going on. In 2000, 2001, it started to get to where lots became very competitive in my market, finished lots, developed lots, where you get multiple bids from investors and builders. But it took a while for that to happen. But yeah, I mean, I was as bullish as you could get because that's the way it was going. Whatever you bought today, it didn't matter. You could sell it for more tomorrow just because rates were coming down, values were going up. Very few people still argue about this and say rates have nothing to do with values and pricing. I'm telling you, I went through it back then. Rates went down, prices went up, and we're seeing it now. Rates are going up, prices are starting to come down in some areas. And again, it's all hyper local. Every area is different and all that. But when it went down in 2008, 9, it affected values all across the country in every single market, even the best markets in the country. Some just, didn't get hit as hard as others.
Yeah. I mean, my market was one of the nasty ones, 75% peak to trough. I was in it. Yeah.
It's like buy the dip, right? So
Ah.
everybody knows the Fed is there to prop the markets up, rescue the markets. It's the Fed put. So what have investors been doing for the last, how many years since 2009? Like 13 years?
Yeah.
Buy the dip.
Buy the dip.
Why? Because you know the Fed's not going to let the market fail. So you have a zero risk market.
Yeah.
So when you're in a zero risk environment, what do? Buy the dip. So why would anybody think or know any different? Because that's the environment they've grown up in. So I don't blame anybody for what they're doing, because it's what's worked, and it always works until it doesn't.
Exactly.
You and I have been through it a couple of times.
It's like, oh, this feels similar. I know.
And I call them old timers, but all of the people that were there before me. So when I entered the business, 1997 to 2000, when I started really building my company and taking risk and doing deals, all of the old timers warned me. They said it ain't going to last forever. They went through the savings and loan crisis,
the SNL crisis. Yeah, I read about that.
And they were saying, let me tell you, it shut off like a water faucet. And I was like, that's crazy. It's never going to happen. Debt's cheap, easy to get. They ain't making any more land. It's only going up. It's, I used all of the same things that people say now. And, 2017, 2018, in October, I was telling everybody I knew in the markets, get out. They're going to raise rates. The markets are going to tank.
Yeah.
And, what happened? Market tanked. And, what happened? Buy the dip. Fed came in, boom, off to the races. Yeah. So until the Fed changes course and adds risk to the market, it's a zero risk market right now. There is no downside until they add risk add risk back to the market, meaning you have downside for bad decisions and nobody's going to bail you out. Then markets can't reprice and things won't change.
No, I totally agree with that. Again, I think what's different this time, and the first time I'm experiencing it as an adult or an investor, is we now have inflation. Inflation is about, in my opinion, is about to be the number one issue for the Fed, and it should have already been. So I don't think the Fed's going to be. I think the Fed is going to go into hibernation. I don't think they can bail it out like they have, but we'll see. I've never seen real inflation in my adult life. Right. I haven't experienced it at the consumer level, but my parents sure did, and their generation sure did. For sure.
So the millennials watching and that are out there, you haven't seen a down market, and you haven't seen inflation, and you haven't seen a risk. You haven't seen a risk market. It's been a zero risk Fed put market with zero inflation since 2008-9, and that kind of environment doesn't last forever. Now it's all temporary, just like we saw. 2008-9 didn't last forever. We won't see a Great Depression because once it deflates and devalues and everything happens, it all rebalances, and boom, we get another bull cycle for another 14, 15 years, and that's just kind of how it works.
Yeah. Totally agree. This has been such a fun conversation. I appreciate it. Where can people find you, Greg?
Yeah, gregdickerson.com. All my info is there. YouTube channel, podcast. Go check it out.
Thanks, buddy.